to the C-Suite, where we're helping women to create choices in their careers. Our first guest tonight has been named by Ignite Magazine, one of Canada's top 10 notable speakers. Tina Varughese does a lot of speaking around the world, talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And she's going to be talking to us tonight about those very topics. So welcome, Tina, to the show.
Happy to be here.
I'm excited to have you here and to be talking about really these three separate topics, but they really are kind of combined into one. So why is diversity, equity, and inclusion really important within organizations today?
You know, in Canada, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives only came into the forefront about 4 years ago. It's been a bit more prominent in the United States, but that's mostly due to affirmative action. In Canada, we've really seen prevalence in the last 4 years. Why it's so important is it kind of comes down to my favorite quote on diversity and inclusion, which is diversity is who's on the team, inclusion is who gets to play. And so we really want to make sure that we're providing psychologically safe environments for everybody when they belong to an organization so that we can really bring our authentic selves to the workplace. And that means being able to be there without judgment, without fear, but rather being able to bring our perspectives and our thoughts so that we create these more creative, innovative, inspiring workplaces to ultimately be.
Mm-hmm. And you talk a lot in your YouTube video, your channel, you've got lots of videos on there and your keynotes around the world. You also hit on the topic of unconscious bias. Can you share a little bit more about what that is?
So, unconscious bias is not racism, it's not discrimination, but it really comes down to how much we're affected by, the news that we watch, the companies that we work with. A big component is the upbringing that we had. Our decisions, our thought processes are all shaped over time. We're not born with biases, certainly, but over time, our biases are shaped. And sometimes we don't even realize if we have unconscious biases. And for the most part, everybody does. We will say things like, I see people for who they are. And for the most part, everybody is coming at this with great intention. But we don't necessarily know if we are truly seeing people for whom they are. There are well over 170 statistically proven unconscious biases. I tend to focus on the key seven when I'm keynoting for organizations. So the key seven being gender, race, religion, sexual orientation, age, weight, and disability, both physical and emotional. And it doesn't mean that we're racist or discriminatory or ageist. It doesn't mean that we prefer men leaders over women. That's not what it means. It just means that we're coming from a place where our brains have been programmed to make judgments, make decisions for expediency, for safety. And because of that, because of the neuroscience of our brains, we make decisions that may not be the right decisions. And sometimes those decisions can have huge impact. Sometimes it's at the workplace if it comes down to recruitment, retention, employee engagement, but it might even come down to a safety issue. I keynoted a very large healthcare conference with CEOs at the table. And sometimes, we don't even know when our biases are at play that might have a diagnosis with a patient that could have grave consequences. We're starting to see it now in the media. There were recent episodes actually with Grey's Anatomy and The Good Doctor with unconscious bias in healthcare. So it's really a relevant topic right now. We're starting to see it in mainstream media, which is awesome because we're starting to talk about something that's really important.
And for someone, an organization who's looking at potentially if they have unconscious bias, where do they start and how do they identify if it exists?
So I really think it starts with you. It starts with really wanting to understand how we are seeing the world that our own lens provides us with. So really wanting to do some of that self-discovery work. Sometimes we call it agents of change, maybe anti-racism, whatever it might be. We can all become, advocates in this space, but it starts with really wanting to be in a place where we can be comfortable with having uncomfortable conversations. I am finding right now that we are walking on eggshells. You know, a lot of people aren't saying what they truly want to say or asking the questions that they should be asking because they're too uncomfortable to ask. And so we come in from a place of walking on those eggshells rather than coming from a place of courageous conversation, which is where we need to be. And so when we come from a place of courageous conversation, we can become very, very comfortable with being uncomfortable and quite frankly, start to have those conversations that we need to have. That starts with education. It starts with awareness. It starts with creating, even diversity, equity, and inclusion committees within organizations, really hearing from everybody, not having the initiatives be from a top-down approach, leadership, but really asking the people within the organization to offer input as to where the company stands and be really open to hearing the answers to that. Because maybe we think we're doing a great job within an organization, and we need to check our own biases and see if we're really doing the great job that we truly feel we are.
Mhm. As a leader, how would you approach potentially having this uncomfortable conversation from the point of awareness or learning?
I think a great starting point is training. Obviously, I'm probably biased there, but I know for myself with Black Lives Matters, I was brought in for a lot of organizations as a starting point, because I do use a lot of humor when I speak, and so it in a way disarms attendees so that they come from a place where their curiosity is piqued and where they have open minds. So I really think a great place to start is just with awareness. There was a great example back in 2018, which isn't that long ago. It happened in the US where Starbucks operation was unfortunately a Black man went to a Starbucks to meet a colleague and he was arrested for trespassing. And as a direct result of that, all US operations of Starbucks closed and implemented unconscious bias awareness and training for their entire staff. So I think it starts with just an understanding of the topic and getting into a understanding of what those terms actually mean and what it means for yourself.
Where can organizations start if they really want to start focusing in on diversity, equity, and inclusion?
So I think a great place to start would be, even when you're having those performance reviews with your employees, start to have conversations and tap in, asking, how do you feel we're doing in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space? I really truly believe it's a bit more than just having a potluck where people bring in a lot of dishes. Really tap in. Your employees will give you amazing information, but I really believe it comes down to leadership. And if your leaders provide an environment where people are seen, heard, and acknowledged, you'll really hear from your employees as to where you can do better. A good rule of thumb is if you're receiving a lot of resignation letters or you're surrounded by silence, you need to do a lot of work.
Thank you so much, Tina, for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Danielle. It was a pleasure.